Okay, so how would I round this first one to 3 sig figs? 200? 201. So you have 201. Very good. Now, 1,342. Rounded to 3. You put the bracket between the 4 and the 2. And then say, I don't know. So 2, you're not going to round up. You're just going to drop it, right? So I know 134. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to walk away, right? Like, if you think about this in terms of money, if you owe somebody $1,342 and you gave them $134 and said, let's go, I'm good. It's just missing $2, not a big deal. It would, their eyebrows would go up. You might not be friends anymore, whatever. But if you gave them $1,340, we'll call it good. So this is an instance where you need to use the placeholders in order to get your measurement to work out. So 1,340 has 3 sig figs. If I put 1,340 with a decimal point after it, it would have 4 sig figs. So that does not have 3 sig figs. This would be 4 sig figs. Okay, this number, do I do anything with these zeros? No. So these are all placeholders. I get to here, I start counting. 1, 2, 3. So 0.0003266. 3 sig figs, 499.6. Put that bracket in between. This 6 is greater than 5, so I'm going to round that 9 up to 10. That 10 gets rounded up here to another 10, and that makes this 4, what? 5. You have to think way back to, our math days. So 500 is what you would get. Now if I write it just like this, how many sig figs do I have? Just 1 sig fig. So I need to put a decimal point. So using scientific notation takes care of any of these ambiguities, but we don't go into it in this course. So just writing explicit decimal points, I know what you're talking about. All right, this last one, your bracket goes between what two digits? 2 and 5. So 4, 2, 2. No, it's not 2. It goes up to 3. Yeah. 4, 2, 3. So 0, 0. Do I put a decimal? No. You just leave it as is. Because if you put a decimal, you're going to change the number of significant figures from 3 to 5. Yes?
And so, like, the one before that, you would say that it would be 500 with a decimal. So we just leave it like that, even if it looks weird, we would put another 0, because then would be 4 sig figs.
Right, because if you put 500.0, this is now 4 sig figs. When you're multiplying or dividing, what's the rule?
You go by the least sig figs out of the 2.
Right, so you go by the least sig figs. So in number 1, how many sig figs in 14.0? 3. And then 3 just has 1. So when you enter this into your calculator, 14 times 3, you get 42. But your calculator's not right. It doesn't adjust for sig figs. So how do I adjust this to 1 sig fig? 40. So you put the bracket there and the placeholder. But once you get to calculations, then you understand why Sig Figs can cause you so many headaches. So every time before I do a calculation with significant figures, no lie, I'm not lying, I say, okay, it's multiplication or division, then you just count out the Sig Figs. If it's addition or subtraction, it's after the decimal point. The answer cannot have more than the least number after the decimal point of the original numbers. So it's almost like, you know, of these calculations on page 9, if you circle all the ones that follow, that go under the same rule, like number 1 is a multiplication, number 3 is a division, number 6 is a division. So they all would follow under that rule, that same multiplication to division rule. Whereas number 2, 4, and 5, these are all addition. So, do you want to work another multiplication and division one or an addition and subtraction one? Multiplication. Okay, so let's skip to number 3. We'll come back to number 2. So 14 divided by 3. So this is what your calculator spits out. But remember, it's multiplication and division. Your answer cannot have more than either of the original numbers. So this is 3 Sig Figs, and this is 2 Sig Figs. So I can only have, is it 2 Sig Figs? That's just 1 Sig Fig.
I was like,
Oh, now I'm really confused. Sorry about that. So, so now I would put my bracket between the 4 and the 6. And what would that make my answer? 5. So that would round up to 5. Alrighty. We'll go to the next multiplication and division. You have 6.380 divided by 42.6. I have 4 Sig Figs here, 3 Sig Figs here. So my answer can only have how many? 3. So that 0 doesn't count. 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to write 1, 4, 9, 7, 6, 5. So I went 3 Sig Figs. I'll put this bracket here. It really helps to write out almost everything that your calculator spits out and then do the bracket. Like, you can make errors, you know, if you don't copy everything down. But, you know, if you were working out a problem and you copied this whole number down, and I could see that you did the brackets, and then I could see that it was just a rounding error. On a 5-point question, I would only take half a point off. So as long as you show me all of this, then I can see that it was just a rounding error. Now, if you just put this answer down and it was hard for me to tell that it was a rounding mistake, then I wouldn't be able to give you as much partial credit. So I always encourage students to get into the habit of writing out all of the steps, even though in the beginning it might seem laborious, but it will help you. I took a physics class when I was an undergrad, and the problems in this physics class were just crazy, right? You know, so I was always at the version of the Science Resource Center. I was always, you know, meeting with other classmates. And one time I worked with this guy, and I could not follow his work to save my life. I would say, how'd you get that answer? And he's like, oh, you know, I just did this number, and he had all these numbers written all over his paper. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? I couldn't follow it at all. So, even just looking at his paper would stress me out. I'm like, just numbers here, like everywhere. So if you get into the habit of writing things out clearly and, you know, almost to the point you think that I'm looking at every piece of your homework so that I can follow along, see what you're doing, it helps tremendously. Okay, so we didn't come up with an answer on this one. What's the answer to the correct number of Sig Figs? So 0.1 So you need to have that. That is not a placeholder. That is actually counts because it's after the decimal. So 0.150 is the correct answer. All right, now let's go back to 2. Remember, with addition and subtraction, you're looking at after the decimal point. So you have 2 after the decimal point here. You have 1 after the decimal point here. When I enter this into my calculator, it's 14.16 plus 3. Oh, look, see? See that mistake I made in my calculator that I wouldn't have been able to see if I didn't have the 2-line display. So 14.16 how many digits after the decimal can my answer have? 1. So 17.4. So if you wrote this out and then you put your brackets, I could follow along with that. Now, once you get a lot better at this and you're used to it, you can make these quick shortcuts. But in the beginning, I think it's better to be more cautious. Number 4, 46. What?
It's a growth hormone. Anaconda looking thing.
So, yeah, cicada. They just want to learn chemistry, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the cicadas are really bad this year.
I know.
I can hear them outside my mouth.
I don't know what kind of bug is out there, but they're like about this big and they're everywhere out
Oh,
there.
the cicada killers? Or
I don't know. They're like this big and they just like fly everywhere as you're walking like out in that area. And it's
Like
I don't think they're like this. I mean, I almost thought that it was like a hornet or something. I mean, they're huge.
Oh, those are cicadas.
Are they
Cicada
Yeah.
killers. If they look like a bee,
Yeah.
and they're like
They're
this
pretty big.
long, and they have
And they're
stripes.
just everywhere. Yeah.
That's yeah. So it looks like a big bee. We had these in our backyard, and I was real nervous with our children, but our bug guy said that they won't sting you unless you step on them. But what they do is they sting a cicada, and then they take it into their little nest and eat it.
I know. I was like freaking out yesterday when I was walking through there, and they were just everywhere, and I was like, I gotta get inside.
There are usually signs like around the eagle and the bell that they're like these are cicada killers. They help our trees because the cicadas damage the trees, but then the cicada killers keep the cicadas in check.
I had to
I
get,
didn't
I
care
just-
for them.
I had to get
I know,
used to that.
Yeah, whoever knew so much
I
about
had
it?
to get used to that moving here because in Louisiana we have just like locusts. We don't have cicadas.
Uh-huh.
So when I saw that huge mutated-looking bug on our porch, yeah, it kind of freaked me out.
Yeah. No, as long as if you step on them, they'll sting you, but they don't like to.
I just found my way inside and walked through the outside.
Yeah. No.
It was horrible. I was like, they were everywhere. I
Huh.
felt like I was being attacked.
Yeah, I can see it.
And I
They
don't do
are.
bugs at all. So.
They are very intimidating. Oh, it's so big. Okay, where were we? No, that's not that. I don't think that's going to be on the test.
Our bug breed.
Yeah, that's more biology. Huh? Okay, 46.6 plus 5.72. So how many can I have after the decimal in the answer? 1. And so 52.3. 52.32 would be your answer. All right, and this last calculation, 6.378 plus 0.0025. I have 3 after the decimal here. How many do I have after? This is just places after the decimal. 4. So you get used to the rules about placeholders and you think, oh, it's just 2. I know that one, it's just 2. But we're just talking about after the decimal. How many are there after the decimal? And there are 4. And this will come up in one of the pre-lab questions. So when you enter this into your calculator, you get 6.3805. So 3 after the decimal, 6.381. So now maybe all these things I was saying about Sig Figs and lab, like once you see them in calculations, you can understand why you kind of go cross-eyed trying to understand all of this. So I'm going to refer to our lab manual. On page 15, let's turn to page 15. So question B on page 15, this is where you have a graduated cylinder. I'll draw you a little picture. So you have your graduated cylinder and it has the different lines. And it's filled with a certain amount of water. Then what you've done is you've taken a metal cylinder and you've placed it very carefully in the graduated cylinder. So you have your metal cylinder like that. So before adding the metal cylinder, the graduated cylinder is 35.2. What are the units? I heard it. Milliliters, yes. So 35.2 milliliters. That's before. And then after, graduated cylinder reads 43.8 milliliters. What is the volume of the cylinder? How would you figure out what the volume of the cylinder was? So final volume minus the initial. Very good. So it would be 43.8 milliliters minus 35.2 milliliters. What do you come up with? 8.6.
So is it Sig Figs or after that?
Right. So now we have to think about Sig Figs. Yes, you got it. So what am I doing? Addition or subtraction, or is it multiplication or division? So you're doing subtraction. So I have to look at after the decimal. So in each of these, I just have 1 after the decimal. So my answer has to have 1 after the decimal. So this is the correct number of significant figures. Any more questions on that one? Let's go now to page 17 in your lab manual. So the ones that are starred, those are the ones that you recorded. So 100.2. I'm just going to write down Jen's data 3. And what's the last one? 120. Good. So I had you hold off on all of these calculations because there were significant figures involved. So now you can probably do these a lot easier because you've learned these rules. So question 4 asks you for the mass of the water. How would I figure out the mass of the water? 2 minus 1. So if you take number 2, subtract number 1 from number 2. So for Jen's data, that would be 100.236. No, sorry, 121.153. 236. So 20.917. Is that the correct number of Sig Figs? Yes. Very good, because I have 3 after the decimal. Okay, the mass of the salt. How do I figure out the mass of the salt? 3 minus 2. So for Jen's data, that would be 122.473. 1.153. Thank you for having data like this. Perfect. Okay, so for Jen's data, the mass of the salt, this is what my calculator tells me. How would I adjust that to the correct number of significant figures? Add a 0. So 1.320. And notice I haven't put grams either. So I need to carry out my units. These are grams. All right, the mass of the salt-water mixture, 4 plus 5. That's right. Number 4 plus number 5. So 20.917 plus 1.320. So 22.237 grams. So when you're in lab, you're always thinking about significant figures, especially significant figures in calculation. The most common deduction that I make during labs is 4 Sig Figs. Either not enough Sig Figs or too many Sig Figs. So hopefully by going over this with you after we covered it in the lecture, it will kind of stick more, that you always have to be asking yourself, do I have the right number of significant figures? Okay, let's do the mass percent salt. And this is explained in your procedure, but I'll go ahead and do this here. To get the mass percent salt, you do the grams of salt over the grams of the mixture times 100. So the grams of the salt for Jen's data, and yours will be a little different, 1.3, unless you're her partner, 1.320 grams. And over the grams of the mixture, 22.237. Now what are we doing? Are we subtracting and adding, or are we multiplying and dividing? Oh, so we've got a different rule. So now we have to think, okay, this isn't addition and subtraction, it's multiplication and division. Now, for your Sig Figs, This 100 does not count at all. Ignore it for your Sig Figs. That's just percent. Yeah. But we do have to pay attention to these 1.320 grams and 22.237 grams. So this has 4 Sig Figs, and this has 5 Sig Figs. So our answer cannot have more than 4 Sig Figs. Good. So 1.320 divided by 22.237. You can enter this all in one step, or you can do it stepwise in your calculator. I'll do it all in one step. But you would get the same answer. So 5.9360525. Now, how many Sig Figs did I say we needed to have? 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5.936. What would the units be on this calculation? Percent, yes. This will, when we learn the conversion factors and dimensional analysis, you will see, yes, these grams cancel out. So all we're left with is percent. So 5.936%. Now we're going to do the same type of calculation, but instead, this time we're going to be dealing with mass percent water. So we're going to put grams of water over grams of the mixture times 100. So for Jen's data, the mass of the water was 20.917 grams. The mixture was 22.237. So how many Sig Figs should I record in my answer? 5. I have 5 here, 5 here. And if you're wondering how this gets to your data, this is number 6 over, number 4 over number 6. Number 4 over number 6 times 100. The calculation above was number 5 over number 6 times 100. Okay, so 20.917 divided by 22.237 times 100. Need to make this to 5 Sig Figs. So 94.063. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll round that up. 94.064%. Your percent that you get, 94.064. And number 8. So you should get number 7 plus number 8 should add up to 100. Just a way to double check. You don't have to worry about Sig Figs or anything here, but just to make sure you're on the right track with the calculations. See how when I add these two numbers together, I get 100. Because you're doing the mass of salt and then the mass of water in this mixture. Questions about anything? Okay. All right, number 10. Let's do and then what? Two. Okay, so for number 10, remember you were measuring the length, width, and height of a block of wood. So with the ruler, you would read between the lines. So you estimate to the hundredths. You estimate to the hundredths. And so this last one, you were right at 2, right? Now, how would you express that number so that you're right at 2, but you're still using the same instrument? 2.00. So we'll fix this for you. You won't get anything counted off. Now, how do you calculate volume? Length times width times height. Very good. So you're going to take 7.71 centimeters times 4.30 centimeters times 2.00 centimeters. Now, what operation are we doing? Multiplication. 3 sig figs. So your answer cannot have more than 3 sig figs. So this 66.306 adjust, so it would be 66.3. Now, what are the units on this? Centimeters cubed. So centimeters times centimeters times centimeters gives you centimeters cubed. What? Oh, absolutely. Questions on that one? All right. So on the next page, I'm not going to do this one with you, but I'm going to warn you, watch your sig figs on this one. I usually get a lot of students who add another 0 after this one. So you're going to be subtracting number 15 minus number 14 to get that answer. When you subtract, what do you have to look at? After the decimal. Right, so after the decimal is what you have to look at. All right. On page 21, this is the prelab. And there are good old sig fig questions on this one. So with multiplication and division, what do you have to look at? The number of sig figs, right? The number of sig figs in either of the original numbers. So this is 2 sig figs, this is 5 sig figs. This is 4 sig figs. How many sig figs here? 1 sig fig. This is just 1 sig fig. So this is 5, this is 2, this is 4. I want you to work those on your own. This last one, I want to explain a little bit, and I'll work this one with you. This one, consider it having parentheses, so it's clear. What are the operations in this problem? Exactly, division, multiplication. So you're still going to be looking at the number of sig figs and the original numbers. I think it's almost easier to break this one up stepwise. And this is probably a more complicated example than you would ever see in lab or in lecture. But it's good to kind of practice applying these. You can do this two ways. You can do this all in one step, or you can do it in steps. So 22.05 times 0.016. You get 0. How many sig figs should I have in that one? 2. So 0.35. And what are the units on that one? So you're multiplying. Grams times grams would give you grams squared. So we're kind of touching on, we're going to get to this conversion work in our next lecture. So that's grams squared, and that's adjusted to the correct number of significant figures. Then you're going to do the bottom calculation. 1.28 grams times 14.119. So I have 3 sig figs here. I have 5 sig figs here. How many should my answer have? 3. So 18.1. Now what are the units on this one? Is it grams per milliliter or is it grams milliliters? Grams milliliters. Yes, so these are multiplied. Gram milliliters. So you hear density a lot, grams per milliliter. So that's what you're thinking of. So it kind of has that dot between. What kind of unit is that? Gram milliliter. It's crazy. We'll keep going. Stay with me. So now I need to divide these. I have one more step. So 0.35 divided by 18.1. So I get, how many sig figs should I have in my answer? 2. That's right, 2 here. 3 here. So my answer cannot have more than 2. So that would be 0.019. And my gosh, what would my units be? It's crazy. So remember, grams squared is really grams times grams. And then you're dividing by grams milliliter. So you're going to get one of these grams to cancel. And I like how you guys are thinking about these units canceling, because the next thing we talk about is going to be conversions and canceling out units. So yay that you're seeing this. And if you're not, we'll work through this a lot more. So the units on this are going to be grams per milliliter. Questions on that one? Okay. I will show you. You might get a little different answer if we do this all in one step. I'll put parentheses. 22.05 times 0.016 divided by 1.28 times 14.119. Now see, at the very end, if I round to 2 sig figs, I would get 0.022. So either way, if you did it stepwise or if you did it all in one step and you got 0.020 grams per milliliter, I would accept that. Like I said, this is kind of a more complex example, but it shows us a lot of different things. But I would not expect to see something so complicated, especially where it's like, what is the order of operations here? Am I dividing? What am I dividing? So I'd like to see parentheses around this question because it always is confusing. The next part of this prelab deals with addition and subtraction. And remember, those are after the decimal point. And there are some tricky ones in here. And we're not trying to trick you. We're just trying to get you to pay attention to after the decimal. And when you're doing these, keep repeating to yourself, after the decimal, after the decimal. Now, you might say, I remember, Natalie, you had this, how many after the decimal is this one? It doesn't seem, you're used, it is 2 after the decimal. And earlier we were working a problem where you wanted to say 1 because you're used to these zeros as being a placeholder. So the more you practice these, the easier they will become. So I will stop